Now we got to talk about what's going on in Syria. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has left the country and has given orders for a peaceful transfer of power, and that was according to the Russia Foreign Ministry, where he ran to seek asylum. So Syria rebels have declared Damascus free and claim that, of course, Assad has fled the capital. So there's a lot going on in Syria. There's been a civil war there. Of course, Assad has had control of Syria for over 50 years with a brutal dictatorship. And with this swift rebel offensive, Assad and his family fled to Moscow and were granted political asylum. He was also claimed to have tortured children, imprisoned people, gassed his own people. I mean, not a great leader in general. So the leader of the main rebel group, Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, called the toppling of Assad a victory for the entire Islamic nation in his first public remarks in Damascus. Also, Joe Biden welcomed the fall of the Assad regime. He described it as a historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria to build a better future, but cautioned it was also a moment of risk and uncertainty in the region. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means because there are, ISIS targets there. There are, all sorts of terrorist groups as well as rebel groups have come together with the common cause of, hey, they're distracted. Russia's, losing to Ukraine in their offensive attacks there. Ukraine is repelling them quite well. And, the stuff with Hezbollah and Hamas over in Israel is, keeping them occupied. Syria is just completely distracted, and there's like no one guarding the castle, essentially, is kind of the idea here. So yeah, there's jubilation on the streets of Damascus after the fall of Assad. We have some pictures here, I think, that we can pull up. And you can see people in the streets. Syrian opposition fighters celebrate after the government collapsed in Damascus on December 8th. A woman shouts as people celebrate. Syrians celebrate the arrival of opposition fighters. People celebrate in Damascus. Opposition fighters celebrate take over the city by the insurgents. So, I mean, it's a good thing. It's a chance for them to start over and to start fresh. And there's a lot of people that are sort of like, Syrian refugees and people that have been in hiding and stuff are like, oh yeah, we can finally go back home. Let's fix everything up. Let's go. Well, I think there needs to be a moment of caution because, you're really not sure which group is going to take the power next. And could it be someone worse? Could it be someone equal? Could that person be good for U.S. interests? Could they consider putting in some sort of democracy? The United States has a presence in Syria as well. Would those forces be in danger by this group that has come in? I want to actually pull up this video here because it shows someone on the ground reacting and asking questions to people in Syria. Let's pull this up real quick. Just trying to. Just keeps auto playing. All right, here we go.
So this man is from the city of Homs. He is obviously completely overcome with
Well, they're pretty excited,
We're
yeah.
just now about 20 miles from the
There's a ward.
Syrian border, and you can see celebrations are breaking out everywhere. This woman actually has just offered me some sweets.
Dude,
Mabruk
this is so. She says Mabruk, and this is such a Middle Eastern thing right here. Like to just carry a trays of sweets and have like baklava and all sorts of other candies and treats like in the car. That really speaks to how like hospitable just most Middle Eastern people are, Mediterranean folks in general. So yeah, let's actually go back.
Offered me some sweets.
That looks good.
لبنانية مش من سوريا بس بيسلموا ايديك بيسلموا ايديك
A little bit of gunfire, but celebratory.
Take a look with me. You can see people are waving the flag of the Syrian revolution. It has got 3 stars. You can see children.
Yeah, they always change the flag when a new group takes over.
And it's just an extraordinary moment. I think no one realized that
God is great, essentially.
After so many years of waiting, so many years. A lot of fireworks as well. Let's keep moving. You can see the traffic is now barely moving. There's just so much energy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild reaction from everybody there, but hopefully this brings about something good for Syria. I would say just be very cautiously optimistic. I wouldn't be too celebratory yet, because here's what's happening. According to Saeed, prisoners freed, refugees are already beginning their return to Syria. Tearful reunions in the streets among long-lost loved ones, celebrations at the possibility of a different future, and this state of genocide and apartheid backed by the U.S. didn't even wait a day to steal land and bomb and displace. Not even a day. So this is Damascus. Israeli airstrikes target the Syrian capital. It comes as the Israeli army has created what they call a buffer zone in the occupied Golan Heights. Now let's remember the Golan Heights are actually, that's actually Syrian territory, and it's actually recognized under international law that those are illegal Israeli settlements once again. So yeah, you can look at some images here, of course. So yeah, they're already taking land. The new government doesn't have the infrastructure to engage with Israeli air power, even if it wanted to. They just took over less than 15 hours ago, and this was December 8th. And who will come to their rescue to fight the Israelis? Not their allies, not the international community that can't even stop the slaughter in Gaza. The Israelis and Americans saw Syria at its most vulnerable and ran towards it at full speed. Devastating. Every Syrian deserves better than to be constantly thrust under tyranny. Absolutely. So it speaks that Israel is already moving in. Now, let's get into details. This actually is from December 11th. Israel strikes Syria 480 times and seizes territory as Netanyahu pledges to change the face of the Middle East. Now, what does that mean, change the face of the Middle East? That means expand Israel and make it into the biblical beast that it was thousands and thousands of years ago, and take that land for the Zionists and kill everyone else that's on it. It's absolutely crazy. So, the collapse of the Syrian regime is a direct result of the severe blows with which we have struck Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a rare press conference on Monday. The Axis has not yet disappeared, but as I promised, we are changing the face of the Middle East. So, Israeli officials have reveled in the downfall of Assad, a staunch ally of Iran who allowed his country to be used as a resupply route for Hezbollah in Lebanon, but they also fear what could come from radical Islamists governing Syria, which borders Israel and the occupied Golan Heights, which, understand, occupied, right? Like, it's not really their land. So Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar told journalists on Monday that Israel was bombing Syrian military facilities housing chemical weapons stocks and long-range missiles to prevent them from falling into the hands of extremists. With regard to what will be in the future, I'm not a prophet, he said. It is important right now to take all necessary steps in the context and security of Israel. That's insane. So, a CNN team in Damascus heard loud explosions throughout the early hours on Tuesday, a continuation of strikes that began over the weekend. Voice of the Capital, a Syrian activist group, said the overnight bombing campaign was the most violent in Damascus in 15 years. Of the 480 strikes carried out by the Israeli Air Force, about 350 were manned aircraft strikes targeting airfields, anti-aircraft batteries, missiles, drones, fighter jets, tanks, and weapon production sites in Damascus, Homs, Tartus, Latakia, and Palmyra. The IDF said. The rest of the strikes were in support of ground operations, which they already have ground forces in here, targeting weapons depots, military structures, launchers, and firing positions. But what they're really doing is trying to seize more territory. The rest of the strikes, all to push forward and take more land and settle it before any Syrians can do anything about it. The IDF also says ships struck 2 Syrian naval facilities where 15 vessels were docked. Dozens of sea-to-sea missiles were said to have been destroyed. So really talk about kicking an entire nation while they're down. Meanwhile, several Arab states have accused Israel of exploiting instability in Syria to execute a land grab. The Arab League, a grouping of Arab nations, said Israel was taking advantage of the developments in the internal situation in Syria, and Egypt said it moves to constitute an exploitation of the state of fluidity and vacuum to occupy more Syrian territories. Nadav Shoshani, a spokesperson for the Israeli military, denied the forces were advancing toward Damascus, but acknowledged they were operating in Syria beyond the buffer zone. The Israeli military has insisted that it is not interfering with internal events in Syria. Katz said in a statement on Monday that Israel was creating a security zone free of heavy strategic weapons and terrorist infrastructures in southern Syria beyond the buffer zone. Yeah, that's just insane. And of course, you can see the Golan Heights is well into Syria if we pull up the map right here. So territory was seized by Israel from Syria in 1967 during the Six-Day War and annexed in 1981. It's considered occupied territory under international law and UN Security Council resolutions. Now, that doesn't mean that land is legal. It's still part of illegal settlements that Israel occupies. So, Israeli ground forces entered Syrian territory after Netanyahu on Sunday ordered the military to seize that demilitarized area of separation between Israeli-occupied Golan Heights and the rest of Syria. That zone was established in 1974 after Israeli forces responding to a Syrian attack captured the Golan Heights in 1967. Israel annexed the territory in 1981, but still considered to be occupied Syria under international law. There you go. So Israeli officials have refused to give details on how far Israeli forces will advance or how long they will stay there. There you go. That's deny. Danny Danon, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, told the Security Council in a letter on Monday that his country had deployed temporarily in few points. He said they were limited and temporary measures to counter any further threat to its citizens. I guess we'll just have to see about that. That's very interesting. Geir Penderson, UN Special Envoy to Syria, on delisting terrorist entities, he says, we need to see that when we move forward that there's actually a transitional body established in Damascus that is inclusive of all communities and is not dominated by one armed group. Yeah, I mean, that's been the central issue here, is that... it's always just one rebel group or one particular category of individuals that ends up taking over parts of Syria, and they screw over everyone else that's in the country. So you never really get like a massive collaboration of an entire country working together. You just have rebel groups all over the place, and you just have constant civil war and disputes throughout the country. And of course that leads to a lot of, civilian deaths and bombings and attacks. And, of course, the previous president, torturing his own people and gassing them. So UN's Special Envoy to Syria, Geir Penderson, was on Medi Unfiltered to discuss the country's new leadership. He says here, the message to Israel is that this needs to stop. We are seeing in the Golan is the violation of the 1974 agreement. This is a very serious issue. This creates obviously challenges, and I've been very open when it comes to this. The messaging coming out so far has been good. What we need to see when they are in Damascus, of course, they are not alone in Damascus, is that this vision is actually implemented. He says the message to the Security Council will be, yes, it's time to have a deeper look at this and see if it's possible to delist. But as I said, only if these things happen. He also says 6 years as special envoy to Syria. Mehdi asks about the UN's role over the last 14 years. He says, we all failed the Syrian people, Peterson responds, and the United Nations, for many, will be the face of that, and we have to take responsibility for that. So, who is the leader of Syria's rebels and what does he want? We're getting this from CNN. It's really interesting. Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, who the U.S. State Department had designated as a terrorist more than a decade ago, is, sort of stepping up and toppling this tyrannical regime of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad in a fast-moving offensive that surprised the world. So he is now the de facto leader, Jalani, of 23 million Syrians and several million Syrian refugees who are outside of their country, many of whom will surely want to return home. So, people are wondering, okay, who is this guy? What does he want? He's essentially a foreign fighter in his early 20s, crossed into Iraq to fight the Americans when they invaded the country in the spring of 2003, landed him in the notorious U.S.-run Iraqi prison camp Buqa, which became a key recruiting ground for terrorist groups, including what would become ISIS. So not a great track record so far. It's not looking very good for him, but Jalani founded a militant group known as Jabhat al-Nusra, the Victory Front, in English, of course, which pledged alliance to al-Qaeda. But in 2016, Jalani broke away from the terror group, according to the U.S. Center for Naval Analyses. Since then, unlike al-Qaeda, which promoted a quixotic global holy war, Jalani's group, now known by the initials HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, has undertaken a more prosaic job of trying to govern millions of people in northwestern Syrian province of Idlib, providing basic services, according to terrorism scholar Aaron Zalin, who has written a book about HTS. So, they're kind of trying to say, is this the same old jihadist wine in an all-new inclusive bottle? Because he has tried to distance himself from Sunni terrorist groups like ISIS and al-Qaeda, saying that people who fear Islamic governments have never seen have only seen incorrect implementations of it or do not understand it properly. So he's tried to reassure Syria's minority Alawites and Christians by saying these sects have coexisted in this region for hundreds of years, and no one has the right to eliminate them. So Jalani is now 42 and has told CNN he has matured since he was fighting Americans in Iraq 2 decades ago. That's pretty crazy. A person in their 20s will have a different personality than someone in their 30s or 40s, or certainly someone in their 50s. It's hard to assess the veracity of Jalani's recent mollifying statements and what they might mean over the longer term, although his men have not carried out ISIS-style sectarian massacres when they have seized Syrian cities. So maybe that's promising. Who knows? From a U.S. perspective, a positive indicator would also be if Jalani helps to find Austin Tice, an American journalist who disappeared in Syria a dozen years ago and who President Joe Biden said on Sunday he believed was still alive. So is Jalani simply the same old jihadist wine repackaged in a new inclusive bottle, or is he the mold of an Islamist leader like Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who while no liberal Democrat won't unleash sectarian cleansing on his population. It's worth that the Taliban had sort of rebranded themselves as a kinder and gentler, like a Taliban 2.0, before they seized all of Afghanistan when we pulled out and in the summer of 2021. They're now ruling with an iron misogynistic fist, just as they did last time they were in power before the 9/11 attacks. So sometimes they try to repackage themselves as all for it, but their terrorist army has ruthlessly suppressed pretty much every ethnic and religious group other than Sunnis. So Jolani's treatment of the Alawites and Christians that he now rules over will be an important indicator of what are his true colors. So we'll have to see what that is. We'll have to see what Joe Biden does in the coming days, and sure, what Donald Trump will do next. Donald Trump has tweeted about Syria in all caps. He says, "This is not our fight. Let it play out. Do not get involved." But the U.S. is already involved because I think we actually have 1,000 troops deployed there on anti-ISIS activities. So American forces have been there for a decade now, and during his first term, Trump went back and forth about withdrawing all of them. So I don't know. We'll see. So that's something that Trump will likely face as he comes into office. But I mean, hopefully this means good things for the people of Syria, but let's see how the rest of the world reacts. Because after President Bashar al-Assad was overthrown, EU countries and the UK have moved to pause asylum applications for Syrian refugees, with Austria announcing deportation plans for refugees. Yikes. Human rights groups have urged the countries to have patience as there is still ongoing conflict and political instability in Syria. I mean, that's very true. Like I said, don't get too excited. Don't move home just yet. I mean, you kind of need to see how things shake out because another war could very well start up. Another group could come in. Russia could fund, some sort of way to reinsert Assad, There could be all sorts of things that could happen here. So despite uncertainty in Syria, some countries have frozen these asylum requests and started planning deportations. Now, Syria's wars displaced 14 million people since 2011, with millions fleeing the violence, including bombings and chemical weapons by the Assad regime. 1.3 million Syrians settled in Europe, with many others dying or disappearing on dangerous journeys. Since the regime's fall, Austria has suspended all asylum claims and announced repatriation and deportation plans for over 40,000 Syrian refugees. Syrians are the largest group of asylum seekers in the country. Germany, Europe's richest country, said it will freeze asylum applications for over 47,000 Syrian people now left in limbo. It was so dangerous they had to flee Syria, but it's also not safe enough that they should actually return. But, some of these European countries, it might be racism, it might be a migrant crisis, it might be a lot of issues combined in which they are saying we do not want these people and we don't need to take them in, which is, I think it's horrible. I think we're countries like America and the UK even to some extent, we are greater because we are many and because we are a diverse community, a mixing pot, a melting pot of many people and many cultures. And that's what makes us great. And so, kicking out immigrants is sort of the reverse of that. We become isolationists, we become racist, and we become less inclusive of other people and other viewpoints. So before the Assad regime collapsed, Denmark and Hungary tried to close their doors to Syrian asylum seekers, revoking some residency permits by claiming parts of Syria were quote-unquote safe. Italy's right-wing government even led efforts to renew diplomatic ties with the regime to make way for deportations. That's insane how excited everybody gets about deportations. So, once again, Israel invaded Syria almost to Damascus in 3 days amidst a relentless bombing campaign to dismantle the country's defenses. Totally devastating. Who will stop this? That's Rania Khalek, journalist and host of Dispatches on the BT Newsroom. So, looking at this, there's a post here from the Jerusalem Post. Israeli military incursion into southern Syria has reached about 25 kilometers, 16 miles southwest of the capital Damascus. Two regional security sources and one Syrian security source said on Tuesday. So, from the Jerusalem Post, Operation Bashan Arrow, IDF destroys over 350 Syrian military targets. So we kind of talked about this a little earlier, but it's just sort of reiterating the point that Israel has made it clear that HTS will not have an air force. They won't have any sort of naval base or any sort of vessels, naval vessels or anything like that, targeting all their missiles and UAVs and fighter jets, radars, tanks, helicopters. I mean, they pretty much want to guarantee that Syria is not going to be able to push against Israel for the genocide that's happening in Gaza, or to, support what Hezbollah has been up to. They want to make sure that they dominate this region, and they want to take more land, and they want to secure the stolen land that is the Golan Heights. That's all we have for you right now.